Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 4 of Salesforce Simplified. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. Today is December 4th, 2023. I really thought it was still November. I really did. Derek Cassese is on with me. Derek, how's it going?
Good, doing good.
How has it been building a Salesforce practice within XenTegra? Like what's been going on? I haven't really caught up with you much lately.
Yeah, it's interesting, man. I mean, we're going through the process, and what I mean by that is the partner process within Salesforce to make sure that we have, the appropriate credentialing that customers are going to want to look at. So that's happening. We also put together two pretty cool assessments that we're offering at no charge for net new, for the customers to at least show them how we work and how they can interact with us and stuff. So it's taken some time to get everything in place, but I'm really excited about what next year is going to bring.
Are you still convinced that there's a ton of opportunity to be a better, unique, differentiating partner in the Salesforce ecosystem?
Oh yeah, I mean, yes, that has not ever changed. I know for a fact that there is a need. When the majority of folks say that their favorite partner is XYZ because they show up, I mean, there's got to be more to it than that, right? So yeah, that's why I'm excited, because I know that we're going to do stuff differently, and we're going to actually we're going to kind of show what the word team means, right? Because we're going to create a team environment with the customers and those that we help.
It's kind of refreshing to be on this side of the fence, I hope, for you, because you're in a world where if you just do good by people, you'll do good business.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why I do these podcasts. We want to talk out loud about things that we believe people should know about, including the topic for today. But that's part of the way you do it better, is you just put yourself out there and give in advance of receiving. And I listened to a podcast over the weekend. I'm trying to find a way to say it where it doesn't. The guy's comment was, "Stop smelling your own gas." Right? Stop caring about what your stuff smells like, and figure out how you can help somebody else with how theirs works.
Interesting way of putting it. Yeah.
And I was like, man, that's a really good way to sum up what we're trying to do. Stop smelling your own farts and start figuring out how to help people with theirs.
There you go. There you go. There's one dropped for this podcast. I love it. Yeah, I mean, there's just a need. I mean, I've done it, right? I've been on the vendor side, I've been on the customer side, I'm now on the partner side, and there's just so much of the show up, what do you want us to do type stuff, as opposed to showing up at least with an opinion, a point of view, so that you're actually adding value and benefit other than just showing up and transacting and pushing buttons.
Yeah, it's the bar, in all honesty, and don't tell the Accentures and Deloittes of the world of this, but the bar is pretty freaking low. Billions of dollars are spent every year, and the bars are pretty low.
And you know what? I mean, at the end of the day, there's room for all and forever. There's room for all of those folks, right? There's so much work that needs to be done from the perspective of, I like to say, wringing out that towel for customers to get the most out of their Salesforce investment.
Oh.
I mean, we're going to do it our way. And, that may be a fit for some customers, and some customers may like the transactional aspect of others. And I'm not worried about that, because there's so much need out there.
Hey, so the topic you brought today that we're proactively sharing, the name of the presentation, it's not a blog, it's a presentation, the sales metrics that matter, 6 experts, 6 themes, 1 invaluable guide. What is this, and why'd you bring it forward? And then we'll go through it and cover some of the topics within it. But what is this, and why do you think it matters?
Well, so yeah, I think it matters because, well, first of all, I think that it's an ebook, but I think it's going to create a pretty interesting conversation. But I also think that what this covers, and how I found this, was going through some of the material for certification that I'm getting ready to take. This was part of a link that was in one of the training courses that I was looking at. And I found it really interesting because it was just going through a panel of 5 or 6 individuals and talking about metrics and dashboards. It's not about AI right now, which is almost every conversation, which is fine. It's not analytics, which is also fine. It's just like everybody that's got Salesforce has dashboards, have reports, right? And I think that it can sometimes be overlooked at the power of those and how to actually deploy them so they're really useful. So that's kind of why I chose this. I think it's a really good conversation and one that's often overlooked, in my opinion.
Okay, so like the first slide that I'm not slide, but the first page, I guess, since the ebook, talks about what's the story behind the metrics.
Yeah. Well, so what I like about this is we're basically talking about how we've got so much stuff, right? It says we're all too busy, right? We've got too much stuff to do. How do you sift through the data and get to the stuff that matters? And so that's the difference between if you've ever seen any type of software where it's really busy, right? And there's just data and graphs and numbers and stuff everywhere. I mean, how do you make sense out of that so that it's actually something that you can leverage to your benefit? And so, this is kind of like, how do you keep your eye on the ball, but then which ball? Like, how do you keep your eye on the data that's important to your business?
Yeah, and I find myself doing that every day. I go down this rabbit hole and that rabbit hole. I'm like, okay, at the end of the day, did I spend my time wisely? Was I looking at the right stuff, or was I looking at distractions?
Right. Exactly. And the other thing that's interesting is different strategies on creating, dashboards. And this, just to kind of put this in perspective a little bit, this article was, the folks on this panel are all using Sales Cloud, right? So when we say dashboard, I'm talking about a dashboard within Sales Cloud. And there's different lenses to that. So whether or not it be, a sales rep, whether it be an executive or what have you, there's different lenses to that. So there's different ways of approaching it, which is what this goes through.
Okay, so the next topic I go to says 6 experts, 6 themes, 1 ebook, and a wealth of insight. Thoughts there?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's really just kind of summing up what this book is about. It's a book. It's 33 pages, but it's not. It's really a description of a panel. So like, if this ebook was a session at one of these events, you'd see like, the 6 people sitting up there, and they would be asking them, which metric motivates reps the most, and they would start talking about it. That's how this is broken down. So we'll go through this. You've got the chapter guide up there right now, right? And it starts with how metrics and dashboards give you an edge. Then you move down to what motivates reps. How can sales and marketing team up? What makes a killer dashboard is one that they'll get to. And then sales critical metrics, the ones that got away. And then the final one is top 3 metrics revealed. So those are the questions that we're going to dive into, and we'll kind of touch on some of the stuff that was mentioned.
Okay, so when the first one is how metrics and dashboards give you an edge.
Right. Yep. So I'll start with this so how do you use the dashboard on a day-to-day basis? I know you just created a new one, so how do you use it?
And I want some visual representation of, are things getting better or are things getting worse?
Okay, and when you say things, what are you mostly looking at?
I mean, at this point, I'm really looking at, are we defining strategic objectives in our accounts? That's the one I'm most focused on at the moment, because I honestly feel like we've done a lot of kind of wandering around in the forest and finding business, like gathering nuts and berries, but we got to get strategic about hunting and farming, and that's gonna take us to the next level.
Yeah.
Even though in a lot of cases people find a lot of nuts and berries and do really well, which we are right now. But when it comes to key technologies like a Salesforce, we got to get strategic.
Yeah. And so what I found interesting in here, so I hope I do the name right, but Nick McClellan from RAM Tracking was one of the folks that they talked, that is quoted here, and saying that the metrics and dashboards has given us enhanced control, visibility, and accountability. And I like the word accountability there, right? So what the dashboard, what they're doing is they're using a dashboard, which, so everybody knows, dashboards are made up of graphs or visual representation of data with an underlying report. But what they're doing is creating a dashboard so that they know and have accountability on what they're trying to achieve, right? And so what they say is they've adopted a holistic view to monitor business activities. So I started thinking about that. I'm like, all right, well, that's interesting because, back in the day with Citrix, when I was on teams like that, we were measured on stuff like that, right? How many activities did you have per quarter, et cetera, et cetera. So that type of information in a dashboard at quick glance can actually do a couple things, right? And there's two different approaches to this. Now, you could actually have a dashboard where you just literally have account and add number of activities, account number of activities. Or you can take a couple of different approaches where you have a completely holistic view of the entire company. It's open to everybody. And so you can see from a rep or from a team perspective, the level of activity that's going on, right? And that, so it kind of goes to, do you want to create this like fully transparent view of the company so that everybody is on the same page? So if you're on the team that has, the smallest amount of activity, that doesn't necessarily mean that, you're going to get fired tomorrow, because if everything is achievable, it's okay to have somebody has to be at last, right? But what it does is it brings visibility into who's doing what. And then correlations can be drawn from that on the dashboard. Okay, well, wait a minute. If this team has more activities and yet they have more closed won deals, there's got to be a correlation there, right?
Yeah.
And that, that's what they're talking about as far as that giving you the edge, right? Is being able to quickly, and it's about quickly, right? Instead of like sifting through reports, how do you quickly look at this stuff, right?
We had the conversations today as a leadership. We're talking about, hiring new salespeople, and my response is, to be successful here, all you have to do is be active. If you're just active enough, doing what we do and adding value to customers the way we do it, if you're just active, you'll be somewhat successful, if not wildly successful.
Well, and that's a starting point, right? Is, all right, let's track the activity. And then once we get to a point where the activity is being really well tracked, then you can get into let's track the quality of the activity. And then you can track the response or outcome of the activity, right? And then you can start really, because what then you can start doing is understanding where you need to move resources around if need be, right? If somebody is really slammed and doing a lot of activity in one spot and they're getting a lot of activity and a lot of opportunities, well, maybe we need help in that space so that as a collective whole, we can actually do more in those locations, et cetera. I found it, what's interesting too, as you read through this, is the different approaches from different business perspectives, right? So like RAM tracking there, it's about pieces, it's about finite items sold, whereas a couple of these other ones was about like services and making sure that they're offering the right things to the right people at the right time, things like that. So it's not a one size fits all. It's got to make sense for the business, and then it's got to make sense for what are some of the really important things that you're trying to see, not just let's put the data there because it's there, right?
Yeah, it's all about what you're trying to see. All right, next section talks about which metrics motivate reps the most. Yeah, that's a very interesting topic.
Yeah, this is one, because okay, so I'm just going to jump right to the one that jumped out at me first. It was Bruce Bratley from First Mile. First line of this says, business development people are motivated by money, right? And I was like, yep, there you go.
In some cases, exclusively motivated by money.
Right. And so in that case, right, he's talking about total sales, not just from wins, but profitability, cash collection. Like in that business, those are really important to the reps. That's important. And to the point where, they know that if they don't have cash flow, then they don't get bonuses, right? And so there's accountability again to these dashboards. Whereas one of these other individuals was talking about like leaderboards. Now, I personally feel like the majority of sales folks that I've worked with in the past are very competitive, right? There is a competitive nature for the most part amongst sales individuals or sales-minded individuals. So a leaderboard concept is also something that I see quite a bit in the Salesforce world. However, and I've touched on this a little bit, it's got to be correctly done in that what you don't want to do is like throw people under the bus per se. So you don't want to have like a leaderboard and then just focus on the people that are always at the bottom. So I think that while doing that, you need, like, I think it's important to make sure that what they're supposed to be achieving is equally achievable across the board. And then, like I said, it's okay to have somebody be at the bottom, because this is, this is about true representation of, the business.
Well, and hopefully you're using that to lift up the ones that are at the bottom, if in fact they want to compete and get lifted up.
Right. The other thing that mentioned in here, right, is the leaderboard. People like, if you have a leaderboard up there, and let's just say a leaderboard is on activities with customers, like there's certain, so activities with customers, closed one, maybe it was a combination, and whoever's on the top of that gets $100 gift card or something like that, right? Like that competition is something that can make dashboard metrics and this type of stuff much more rewarding for folks, as opposed to just sitting there and looking at numbers and mundane reports.
Well, it's certainly a funner way, a more fun way.
Yes.
Job and doing your job, and hopefully financially rewarding as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
This next chapter talks about how can sales and marketing team up and win. How does that align with this conversation?
Yeah. So if you look at the key takeaway on this section, before I even get to that, so when I read that, my first instinct was the easy ones to think about are, when you've got marketing and you're spending money on campaigns or events or, anything related to a marketing budget that's going to help drive sale.
Well, pause there for a second, because that's the number one objective, is to drive sales for the company and the sellers. That's why we do the marketing. And right, as you know, we do a ton of marketing investment in that.
Correct. Right. So with that being said, it's extremely, extremely important to understand the return on all of that.
Right.
And so being able to accurately show the influence of those marketing events, what have you, against the sales, the closed won opportunities, etc., is extremely important, right? And that's where, dashboards that focus on successful campaigns or segments, like they talk a lot about, segmenting out from a marketing perspective, certain areas where you've done events. For example, you could have events, the same event in one location versus another, and you could get, 10 opportunities and, five closed won opportunities out of one and nothing out of the other. And it helps kind of shine a light on where maybe it makes more sense to focus moving forward for various reasons. But having these dashboards that have that information on there, again, I like to do the holistic view, right? So let's have shared dashboards so everybody in the company can see this, so that, a sales rep or a sales team or anybody in the company knows why it's so important to make sure that data is accurate in Salesforce, because it's shown up on this dashboard, because it's important to marketing, because it helps continuing to fund the marketing budget. That stuff, in my opinion, is one of the easier ones to really wrap your head around.
Well, this whole conversation is so interesting to me because we are a Salesforce partner and we are a marketing and sales organization. So all these things we're talking about, I see show up as relevant in our business every single day, where, you may spend $10,000 on a marketing event, but nobody ties the opportunities back to that marketing event. And you're like, okay, well, we just won't do that again. Everybody, no, let's do that again. Let's do it again. It was awesome. It's like, well, there's no correlation of the picture that should be painted that shows that it was worth it.
Yeah, and that's, the other thing not to lose here is that it's metrics, and it's dashboards and metrics, right? The metrics are important because that's what's going to help make sure that you're putting focus, attention, and effort in the right spot. You're putting events in locations that make sense. So, for example, a metric may be attendance, right? And like if you've got one person at an event, that metric is not really a positive sign for an event in that location and or attendance generation in that location, as opposed to the metrics saying we've got 35 people, standing room only, etc. So it's the metrics in addition to the dashboards that really create that powerful view of the business and help folks understand, how to make data-driven decisions.
Next chapter talks about what makes a killer dashboard.
Yeah. So this one is probably subjective, I think. I think that, it's interesting. So, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. I think that what I feel like a killer dashboard for me is one that's not too busy. I see a lot of dashboards that are created that have like 12 gauges, like 6 or 7 numbers, 5 tables. And to me, the way that I work, that's very distracting to me. I would much rather have that dashboard be kind of segmented and have a couple dashboards than have all of that stuff just kind of smushed together. Now the art, and that's me, that's my opinion on some of this stuff. I think that what this article is saying is that, a killer dashboard is one that addresses the problem and what you're trying to show, right? And so focusing at, like, for example, this guy Bruce at First Mile, focus on customer, like lifetime sales value. Don't chase the headline sales, but look for bottom line. So what he's focusing on are things that are important. Put that on there. That's important. Like, let's not chase. Like, I think you touched on this a little earlier. If there's so much data, like, make sure that if you're putting something on a dashboard, like, it makes so much sense about why it's there that you wouldn't have to tell anybody. And it's very easy to understand why it's important to the business. Just because we can put something on there doesn't mean it needs to be on there. And I think also, the feature of Salesforce where you can subscribe to these things so that every morning in your inbox, you can see a snapshot of the dashboard because it's updated, always got the latest type of data in there. You want to make sure that you're able to kind of look at that stuff and digest it without having too much, because I feel like if there's too much on there, it devalues what you're really trying to get across. Let me ask you. So when you look at dashboards, how do you consume them? Does it matter the layout, the look, the feel to you, or is it really you're just going and hunting around and looking for the data that you're looking for?
I think it depends if I created it or if I'm using someone else's.
Yeah, so I would bet the ones you create, you feel much more comfortable with.
Sure.
And the ones that somebody else has created, it may take you a bit of time, or you may have actually even gotten to a point where you're just like, not for me.
Or I just go create my own to look for to put together the information I'm looking for.
Yeah. And I think we also need to remember that before any of this stuff was around, it was all spreadsheets, right? It was all like spreadsheets and different locations for this data. So I think that because of the fact that it's so easy to make reports, it's so easy to make dashboards. I think that I think we're lucky in that sense, but again, taking the time to really think it through is important to make sure that you're actually putting the things on there that make sense, the things that you really need in the dashboard, as opposed to knowing you have a report and you can pull it up when you need it.
Well, and if you're not careful, people use dashboards to just basically aggregate spreadsheets, and you really want to take it to the next level where it's graphical representation of what that report's showing. So you're not digging through spreadsheets, you're getting surfaced up some visual of what you're looking for.
Yeah. Like I think, if I had, a dashboard for overall health of a business or a company, like understanding customer value and having that right there up front, everybody sees it, is important to me. Like, that is something you put on a dashboard. I don't know if I need to know necessarily like that there's, 4 opportunities that didn't close last quarter. Like, I need to know the value of this customer. That's the type of stuff. And it depends. Right now, if you're looking at quarter opportunities, then fine. Then you're going to have, opportunities that were lost. You're going to have opportunities that were still in, the deal cycle, et cetera. But I don't know, like, from an overall holistic dashboard, I think you need to be careful putting too much of everything in there.
Right. Yeah, and I'm literally messing with the dashboard I created for me and you right now while we're having this conversation, and I'm evaluating what all's in there, because literally it needs to tell a story, I think, is what really your dashboard's supposed to do.
Yeah, and that's my thing with me, is that if you can do it and not have to tell people why something there or what it is, like, you have to tell somebody what it is, then I think it needs to be reevaluated, personally. But I do agree with you, and I think, like, making it, visually appealing to just look at, so that you're not overwhelmed by all these numbers and stuff, is important.
So I'm doing this literally right now as we talk, but you see a picture and you see a name of the widget that's part of that dashboard. And then when you click on the data, and if you click on all 3 of those things, it should be obvious what this one's trying to highlight for you.
Correct. Yep. And, and some of this is also just, dashboard creation, if you will, like putting correct titles there, and, having the right, because there's graphs that are right for data and graphs that are not correct for data. And then, like, making sure that you have the appropriate graphs and things like that are important. And do you even need a graph? Do you even want a table? Things like that are important as well. But at the end of the day, you've got to have the right metrics and stuff like that. Like, and it's got to make sense for the business.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm super excited to show you this one. I don't know if I've showed you the one I was working on the other day or not.
No, not yet. That's why this is a kind of a timely discussion, right? Because it makes you take a step back, because what everybody does, right, is you're sitting down, you've got the power of Salesforce at your, click of a button, you can create all this stuff, and more than likely you're just going to sit down and start creating. You're not going to, take a step back and really, and whiteboard it out, right? Or plan it out, and then go and put it together, as opposed to doing the stuff just kind of on the fly and iterating, which, that's a perfect world, right? Sometimes you just need to go at it and do the iterative model.
But the thing about dashboards is, as long as the data is good and the reports are malleable, which they are, then you can your dashboard can morph and morph and morph until you tune it up to the way you want it to be.
Yep. Like, for one thing I think would be a pretty interesting metric, to see from a company perspective for us, and, anybody listening to this podcast, so, the Salesforce partner piece of this XenTegra puzzle is still very new, and it'd be interesting to get a pulse on the level of, like, if I was to ask anybody in the company, what's your comfort level on what Salesforce does?
Yeah.
Right. Like, just seeing that, like, and then also tracking, like, enablement. So if we're doing enablement stuff, like, I would expect that the more enablement we did, the higher that score would go. Right. And being able to kind of track things like that are really interesting to put, on screens and keep track of, and, subscribe and get the emails and all that good stuff. So there's just a lot of different ways you can do that. And it makes it interesting when you put it all together.
Well, it's so powerful that your company can have dashboards, your department can have a dashboard, and you as an individual should have a dashboard or 2 or 3 that helps to motivate you and helps you understand your day, your week, your month, your quarter, your year, how it's going.
Yep.
Everybody can have it. All right. Next one talks about sales critical metrics, the ones that got away. What does this mean?
Yeah. So essentially, let's see, which ones are we on? We're on 5. Yeah. So, so this is essentially talking a little bit about what I've already talked to about, but, like, so with so much data, right, they're talking about, it's easy to overlook important things. So, and I've touched on this before, but customer lifetime value, what is that? As opposed to, tracking the top 5 deals of Q4, like some of that stuff is great and all, but at the end of the day, what is that going to do in 2 quarters? I mean, it's a point in time of the existing situation of your deals, but I want to know, I want to know the value. Like, I mean, we could have twice as many customers that buy half as much, right? I mean, and so that doesn't move anything really. So that's why I want to know like the value of my customers, what's the satisfaction of my customers. I think ideal for like company-wide holistic dashboards, given if you're like in charge of sales and you need to drive sales, then obviously there's going to be a point. And that's why I mentioned in the beginning of this podcast, there's different lenses. Then it makes sense to understand from a rep, from an account perspective, what's the, where are we with like, the funnel, the opportunities, leads, etc.
And I think that really depends on what kind of company you are. Are you a private company trying to be bought? Well, then you're trying to drive certain metrics. Or you're a public company that's trying to be bought because you're trying to drive your stock price up. Then maybe similar metrics. You're like us, where you're a private company. You're looking for long-term customer for life type scenarios. So customer value, customer satisfaction is more important than quarterly revenue number.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that from my perspective, looking at where I feel there's a massive need from a Salesforce perspective, which is let's help people get out of the game of hiring a Salesforce admin, losing a Salesforce admin, hiring a Salesforce admin. Let's outsource that to us, to a partner like XenTegra. And if that's the business model, then customer satisfaction is gold, because I mean, there's too many options in today's day and age for people to stay with partners or companies that are not satisfying the requirements or the expectations. Now, what's odd is that I do see people staying with partners and stuff that are still not meeting expectation, but I think that that's because I don't think they feel that there's any difference amongst their options, right? So yeah, I think that
they've just gotten used to that's how it is, and this anemic result that I'm getting that's normal, and it's not.
Yep.
It's common, but isn't right. I guess maybe that's a better way to say it.
Yeah. So that really what they're trying to drive here is to just think it through, make sure you're not overlooking something that's really, really important to the overall success of the business.
All right, and finally, the last section here talks about dashboard essentials, my top 3 metrics revealed. I guess they asked the individuals as part of this panel what matters most to them.
Yep, and that's where you start thinking about a lens and an individual role and things like that. I've mentioned it a couple of times. Like for me, that the things that I think are really good from a dashboard perspective is overall business health. Customer satisfaction, pipeline, lead gen, like that stuff is important because it's almost like, how are we today, but how are we going to be a year from today? Right. And I feel like the pandemic kind of shined a light on businesses that didn't take or put enough time and effort into that last statement. In that, what is it going to look like in a year? Like, do I have the relationships that I need to maintain and continue to, support my customer base?
Definitely was a difference between people that could survive in a industry that wasn't highly sought after in the pandemic versus the ones who could not.
Yeah.
And, nobody saw that coming, but you had to see. Nobody saw that specifically coming, but there was certainly plenty of opportunities to know you weren't doing it the way you should have.
And I also think that what it forced people to do is you had to kind of, like, you weren't, getting taken out to lunch and you weren't getting all that other stuff. So you were looking at basically the actual work, right? And the actual return on investment. And I think that people finally said, okay, well, maybe we need to make a change here. and find another, another company. Whereas if you had, if you have really strong relationships, that should never be something that's brought up, right? If you have a true partnership, right? So
if you have it, like in this case, a partnership between the partner, us, Salesforce, the vendor, and the customer, if all three of us are at the table knowing we're doing what's right all the time for each other, then if it fails at that point, well, there's nothing you could have done. It was just the scenario.
So yeah, so I mean, hopefully, I mean, this is kind of an interesting one. I think it's a good topic for people that are dashboards are often just there, right? You may not even given it a lot of thought. Like, okay, well, let me actually take a step back and think about this for a minute, because I look at it a lot of times. Dashboards the first thing you see when you open Salesforce, right? And is it actually helping you? And then to take that one step further in a future pod, right? We can contrast that to what does an analytics dashboard do for you, right? What's the difference? So,
yeah, I'm excited about that.
yeah.
So Derek, I think we're good here. I think we've covered the topic well, and excited to get this one posted. I'm also excited to get off here, stop sharing my screen, and show you this dashboard I created so I can get your feedback on it.
Awesome.
Well, with that, we'll wrap this one up. Thank you for listening, and Derek, thanks for being part of this.
Appreciate it. Till the next time.